Let's go.
Well,
Your trip to Cuba.
well,
Was
okay,
this
well, it was just kind of like, just, this is a whole long story. Well,
was it
no, I was riding home.
what was the time frame?
Oh, what's it, 20 years ago?
20 years
Or
ago.
30,
So,
25, 30, I don't know, I'd have to sit down and figure it out.
1990s,
No, 80s, late 80s probably.
late 80s.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got,
So when Bush was president.
I guess, I don't remember that either, but all I remember is this. I had bought a new truck in Savannah, and I had an older Mercedes that I was driving, but I bought this new truck. And I was on my way home in the Mercedes, and the guy from the truck dealer called me up and said, "Hey, got your truck in. You want to come get it?" I said, "Yeah, it'll be tomorrow before I come see you." "How late are you open?" He goes, "Oh, we're open until 8 or something." I said, "Great." So I continued on my way home, and I got about, I don't know, 20 miles from here, and I got another phone call from the sheriff.
Uh huh.
And he goes, "Rick, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm heading home." He goes, "I wouldn't head there if I was you." He goes, "You got every three-lettered initial agency in your driveway I've ever heard of." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You got DEA, FBI, you got them all." He goes. I said, "For what?" He goes, "The plane load of coke that's out in your field." I said, "The what?" And he goes, "If I was you, I wouldn't go home right now until you could figure it all out." I said, "Okay." So I turned around, drove to Savannah, went to the truck lot, told the guy I wanted to pick up my new truck. It had a paper tag on it. It was a Ford F-350 King Ranch. It was real nice and plush, and it was a dually, and it was 4-wheel drive. So I mean, it was a little pricey for that truck. But it was brand new, and I said, "Well, screw it." My birthday was coming up in a day or two, 2 days, I guess it was. And I got in that truck, and I hit the interstate, and I drove to I-10 down in Florida and took a right. Yep. Drove all the way to Texas. Got there on my birthday in Brownsville, Matamoros, and crossed over on my birthday with that truck with the paper tag. They were bitching about it, and I had to go buy some kind of stupid thing there in Mexico to get it across, and blah, blah, blah. The state was saying I wasn't going to sell it. You understand what I'm saying? So I said, okay. So I entered into Matamoros, and I rented a room, and then it was my birthday. So, fuck, I got high. I found some pot and some coke and started, just got high. Ate dinner, went to sleep, got up the next morning and headed south. And I just started driving in the truck, and I drove forever in the truck, but I was just stopping here and there, and I mean, it was a pretty peaceful ride, even though I was snorting coke and, smoking pot. It was, I was having a good trip through Mexico, and I was heading down to Acapulco. So I went down there and hung out, because I've mentioned Acapulco before. So another time I went down there and I was hanging out. And at the time my daughter was around, so it wasn't so hard for me to, it was easy to go to the house. So I went down there and hung out and just kind of hung out a minute. And well, then all of a sudden.
Is that when you had the house in Acapulco? Okay.
And then all of a sudden, well, you don't really own anything in Mexico. You just lease it for 99 or 100 years.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, yeah, you told me the story about after your daughter died, it was hard to go back there, and
right.
And yet,
so I
do you
just
still
hanging
have the
out down there.
lease there?
No.
No.
And then there was a knock at the door one day, and it was an Interpol agent. And I looked at him and said, "How can I help you?" He goes, "You are wanted in America." I said, "Great." And I looked around for any other local PD. There was nobody there. I said, "Have a good day." Shut the door. Mm-hmm. Well, needless to say, the truck was packed, and I left right quick, and I just kind of like disappeared and took my truck down to a friend's house about 2 hours south of Acapulco, and I can't even think of the name of the town. But
So, wait, a guy came and
from
not
Interpol, yeah,
and because he tracked you down.
yeah,
Cause,
yeah.
How were you wanted in America? Was it
Well,
for
that was for that.
embezzling or?
No, it wasn't even that. It was, no, that's another whole story about this banker down here now.
Okay.
Well,
Well, we want to get distracted. Go ahead, dear. Acapulco. Sorry.
all right, so then I go down about 2 hours south of Acapulco, and I had my friend give me a ride to the airport, and I flew to Costa Rica, and then I went across to Colombia, and I was not looking over my shoulder all the time. I mean,
Right.
wasn't a lot of that. And I said, well, fuck it. I went to Rota, Spain, and hung out for a month. Yeah. I said, okay, this is cool. And then I flew back into Mexico City. Then I met a Mexican that sold me a voter ID card so I could go down, and then he had a connection down there, and my mother's name was, Lopez. So I got my Mexican ID and voter registration card and everything with that birth certificate that was hokey doked, and yeah, so I became a Mexican and had an ID card. Well, then I figured out that I could go to Cuba from Mexico with that little ID card. So I said, fuck it. I went to Cuba because I figured they couldn't look for me there.
Right.
And I was 100% right. Because they were close to me in Mexico City. They said, we almost got you in Mexico City, motherfucker. When the team that was hunting me down finally caught me, they were really cool. They were a bunch of youngsters. And they said, dude, we've had a riot chasing you for a year. I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, we've been to some exotic places, bro. I said, yeah, man. On the government's dime. Imagine that. Yeah, so it was pretty fun. I mean, these guys were really funny. And, I don't have any animosity. If I'm doing a criminal activity and get caught, well, if the cop that arrests me, then he's just doing his job. No different than I was doing my job, but I was doing he was doing his job better than I was doing my job because I was in handcuffs.
Right.
You can't be mad at him for that. You know what I'm saying? You got to look at that like realistically. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to kill you because, I'm going to go to jail for something stupid I did.
Right.
Well, you really don't. That's not the attitude to have.
Right.
So, anyways, I, finally got caught, and I got actually picked up in Mexico and brought back across the border. And
So you didn't go to Cuba?
yeah, yeah. Oh, here's the funny part. I went to Punta Gorda, Cuba, is where I ended up. I flew into Havana and then went as far west on the island as I could go, out by the sugar cane, and it was just beautiful. I mean, and the little village I was in was a fishing village, so it was like really quaint, old docks, old boats, old everything, old cars. It was like you transformed back into the 50s. I mean, all the cars there are from the 50s, so it's like,
Right.
wow, wait, and some of them are cherry shaped, like brand new. I mean, like that's how they keep them.
Right.
So it was like, I was just amazed at the cars. But after about 2 weeks of being there, I noted a guy kind of standing there looking at me. Well, then later in the day, I caught the same guy standing somewhere else kind of looking at me. And I said, because my Spanish sucked, bro. So how could you be a Mexican looking like a gringo and don't speak any Spanish hardly? So, Cuban, they still have eyes, so it was like, okay, I figured I better get out of there. So the next day I took a cab into Havana, flew back into Mexico. I said, wow, I mean, that was pretty crazy, that whole journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, that was the end of it. But what I was on the run from was I had, many years ago at the Bank of New York, I'd established an account, and I had $710,000 in that account. I kept rolling it into CDs. Every time it was time, I'd just roll the CDs and keep the account flowing at the Bank of New York, and I hadn't touched it other than internal activity of rolling CDs. I'd never took any money out of it or added any to it.
Right.
For 12 or 13 years, that account sat just like that. Well, I thought I needed the money down in Savannah for my construction company and everything, so I said, okay. I found a bank in Pooler that was just opening it up, and I went in to see the president of the bank, and it was just a little kind of hokey-doke local new bank. I went in and I told him the truth. I said I wanted to move that money. I said, and that money might have came from ill-gotten gains of drug activities, 11, 12 years ago. He looked at me, he goes, let's open you an account. Well, that's what I did. So we transferred the money. Okay. He gets confirmation that the money's coming. It's a holiday weekend. I went out. He gave me a checkbook with 10 checks with $700,000 in the, because he had called, and he's the one that did the transfer with the Bank of New York guy. And I mean, he was doing it while I was sitting there conference calling, and you know what I mean. So he knew the money was on its way. We had confirmation numbers faxed, because this was before fancy computer shit. I mean, you know, it was there, but not like it is today.
Right. If it was, yeah, early or late 80s.
Right. And back then, the money was transferred. It went from not straight from bank to bank. It went from to the Federal Reserve, then to the other Federal Reserve, then transferred out. And, you know, that's the way they did it.
3 days time,
track money. So he gave me this checkbook, and it was a 4-day holiday weekend. Well, I got that checkbook. I went right down to the John Deere tractor place where I had a $130,000 note, and I wrote him a check. I said, here you go. Drove down to the Acura dealer and bought me a little MDX SUV kind of thing for $42,000. Wrote him a check. Stopped at Walmart, bought $150 worth of groceries, wrote a check. Got gas, wrote a check. Had my holiday weekend. Everything was wonderful. The next day it was, the tractor dealer called me and said, you know, the check ain't clearing. I said, what? So I went to the bank. The bank said, I don't know. He's looking around. Next thing I know, there's feds in the door. And they come to me and they say, okay, where's this money coming from? I said, I put it in there 11, 12 years ago from real estate sales that I didn't claim on my taxes, so I'll pay my taxes now. You know, that's what I said. And they looked at me and they said, oh, well, you're under investigation for funneling terroristic funds. I said, what? He goes, yeah, that's right. So I wasn't arrested. I was told that, you know, I couldn't leave the country and they were going to talk to me tomorrow. That was what they said when they left. I said, okay. So I got on the phone to Johnny right quick. I said, Johnny, this is what's happened.
Who's Johnny?
My attorney.
Oh, okay. Was that the...
It don't matter the last names. People are still alive.
Right, okay.
So it's like, you know. Anyways, he came right down, and he flew down that night. And then the next morning, come to find out, the Bank of New York was under investigation for funneling terroristic funds to Iran or wherever.
Oh.
So when I moved
also the company you had CDs from.
My bank account. The CDs came through the bank. I don't know who had the CDs.
Oh.
I was buying
just the money that
jumbo CDs.
Somehow it came across.
Well, you know, when I deposited it, nobody questioned it. I
right.
Put the money in the bank. Nobody questioned where the money came from.
Right.
So it was
money.
safe.
Right.
What happened was when the feds were investigating the bank for terroristic funding, they saw this account that had been laying dormant for 12 years with no activity all of a sudden get emptied.
Gotcha.
To a brand new bank. Red flags everywhere. Red flag, red flag.
Red flag.
And then when they checked my name, 5 red flags. So it was like, what the fuck? I mean.
Right.
So then they finally charged me, and that's, you know, wow. And then, so I'm out on, I had to post bond, a $20,000 bail for that, on bank fraud and money laundering. The bank fraud was from the checks that bounced.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how they...
Because you were defrauding a bank without intent because
right.
you thought that it was all legitimate.
The wire got held up by the feds, so it never reached the bank. So they stopped my wire transfer and then have the gall...
Then charge you with it.
Yeah, and have the gall to take me to federal court over a bad check charge. The judge even said, why do I have all these different agencies over what I see as a state-level bad check charge? Well, then they got, well, the terroristic act of was violated by it. What the fuck?
Right.
And so then I hired an attorney, down here, I had to have local counsel that was the judge's partner, 10 years ago. Yeah, I found the right attorney. So when we walked into the courtroom, it was, "Hey, Carl. Hey, Ben, come up here for a minute to the desk." And they were talking about fishing and laughing. And, so I had it in at the court level. He didn't like the feds because the feds had stepped out of the bounds, and he knew it. So he was real mellow and gave me the least amount of anything when the way it was, I'd signed a piece of paper on the wrong line accidentally. And that's what gave me the time. I honestly did. I was filling out one of the forms, and that's what they got me with was fraudulent paperwork. What the fuck? And bad checks. Well, needless to say, I covered the checks, before court. I had them paid for, because I figured that would help.
Right.
And then try to explain the mess. But the reason I had to turn around on the road because of a plane load of coke at my house. I'm going, what the fuck? I swear I hadn't done anything, didn't know anything about it. A Argentinian pilot falls out of the sky and lands in my field.
Oh my God.
Yeah, with 700 and something pounds of cocaine. Yeah, and one of the farmers saw the plane going in and called the police department because he thought they were crashing, which he was. He was dead in the water. He had, motor sputtering and a twin, so he wasn't doing so good. I mean, and it landed in a field. I had a sprayer that went around and sprayed my fields with a plane, and he had a fuel buggy full of aviation fuel where he'd land in my field and fill out and then do all my fields, and then, well, so here's a fuel buggy out in the field where he decides to land full of avgas, so it looked pretty guilty.
Right.
And then Rick and his name looked real guilty to the cops, so they just...
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
So by chance, a smuggler just happened to land in your field.
By a fluke.
Oh
His fuel lines were clogged from bad fuel. So, what the fuck, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. So, anyways, I called from afar and asked the sheriff if there was a bail on the Argentinian pilot. And he goes, I guess there is. So I had my daughter go over and pay the bail, and she drove him to Atlanta, gave him money for the ticket, and sent him back to Argentina. I figured if we got rid of the problem, and
Right. Your name wouldn't be involved. Okay.
Well, mine wasn't anyways. So I said, well, I'll get rid of him.
Well, I mean, but it was in your field,
Yeah.
so it kind of tied into you.
So get this, at the very end of it, I got charged nothing, but they confiscated 75-acre field for the facilitation of drug operations. They took it. Yeah, I said, what the fuck? So then they put it on auction, and I couldn't even bid on the land. And it was landlocked in amongst all my fields. Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a friend bid on it. I got it back, but it was part of the farm. I didn't want to lose it.
Right.
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy.
Wow.
Crazy days.